19-year-old Nora Smith had never been intimate with any man, yet she received a shocking diagnosis from the doctor. She was 4 months pregnant. Nora now faced ridicule from the public due to her unexplained pregnancy. This situation made her an unlikely match for Anthony Gray, her fiancé, who not only possessed good looks but also came from an upper-class family. Nora's father tried to console Anthony by suggesting they send away the baby after it was born. However, Nora had already developed a strong attachment to her unborn child and refused to part with it, even if it meant risking the end of her engagement. 5 years later, Nora returned from abroad with her adorable daughter, Cherry. Miraculously, Nora's obesity had been cured, transforming her into a gorgeous lady. Their return served as an opportunity to officially call off the engagement, but their true purpose was to search for Nora's missing son. Nora had given birth to twins, but her son had vanished mysteriously. What awaits Nora and Cherry upon their return after 5 years? Let's find below.
Chapter 1. Saving Nora by Josh Williams. Recorded by Resonant Reed.
Miss Smith, you're pregnant.
The doctor's words were filled with a thunderclap, making the sleepy Nora Smith's eyes to widen suddenly in shock.
What? How could this be?
Although she was 19 years old, she had never been intimate with anyone of the opposite sex. However, the doctor handed her the medical report.
You're already in your 4th month of pregnancy. You're not in good health, so you won't be able to surgically induce labor. You can only choose to give birth to the child.
Nora returned home in a daze. After her father gave a stern scolding, he searched the surveillance cameras, only to find that 4 months ago, she was indeed staying at home obediently due to poor health and hadn't gone out at all. However, outsiders didn't believe it. Everyone secretly mocked her.
Her belly is already so big, yet she is still giving excuses and saying that she didn't stray with some man. The Grays are so pitiful. Why do they have to be engaged to such a person?
She has been fat and ugly from the start, and neither is her family background very good. It was a few lifetimes worth of blessings that she could climb the social ladder by jawing a connection with the Grays. Now that she's gotten herself pregnant before the wedding, surely the Grays will break off the engagement, right?
Amid all the speculations, Anthony Gray paid the Smiths a visit. At that time, Nora's stomach was already beginning to show. At 8 months of pregnancy, her belly was big enough to cover her toes. In the study, Nora's father asked cautiously,
"Anthony, are you thinking of breaking off the engagement?"
Anthony gave an unexpected answer. The Grays were a top-class, rich and powerful family while they, the Smiths, were just middle class. Even if they took the opportunity to break off the engagement, no one would be able to criticize the Grays for it. By refusing to break off the engagement, what were they after? The more Anthony thought about it, the angrier he became. He cursed irritable.
The sight of her pig-like face already disgusted me from the start, and now she's even pregnant with someone else's child. Why should I be the hero to take over the responsibility?
Nora's father immediately said,
"Don't worry, Anthony. I'll send the baby away immediately after she gives birth."
Nora, who had kept quiet all this time, suddenly raised her head and said, no, in the past few months, she had gone from hesitating to being at a loss, and then to a state of reluctantly accepting reality. She could feel her child's heartbeat more and more clearly as each day passes, and she had already long since developed feelings for it. The child was innocent. They mustn't abandon it. She wanted an annulment, but it was at this exact moment that she suddenly felt waves of pain and convulsions in her lower abdomen. She was about to go into labor. 5 years later.
"Mommy, wake up. The plane I was taxing."
The crisp voice made Nora open her eyes, upon which she immediately saw a delicate, adorable, and young face. Cherry Smith's big grape-like eyes blinked, and she rested her chin on her hands.
"Mommy, did we come back to the States this time to look for Daddy?"
Nora stretched and sat up lazily in her comfortable business-class seat. She said lightly, "You don't have a father." Cherry sighed like an adult.
"I'm not a 3-year-old anymore. I'm not going to believe your nonsense. I don't have a father." Surely I couldn't have just popped out of a rock, right?
Nora didn't reply as she tied up her shoulder-length hair. Her fair skin and sharp hurt nose, coupled with her rosy lips and graceful figure, made her a beautiful sight on the plain. Cherry continued to mumble dissatisfiedly.
If it isn't to look for Daddy, then is it to look for my elder brother?
Elder brother. A cold glint flashed past Nora's downcast almond-shaped eyes. That year, she had actually given birth to a pair of twins, a boy and a girl. However, Nora's father had disregarded her wishes and forcibly abandoned the two children. She had climbed down from the delivery bed and fought with all her strength. In spite of that, she had only managed to save Cherry. After that, she even went into critical condition. Had her aunt not rushed back in time and took her overseas to recuperate, she would probably have ceased to exist in the world. It took 5 years before she finally recovered. Her obesity, which was caused by the mistaken use of hormones during her childhood, was also finally cured. On the surface, her return to the States this time was because the Greys had finally agreed to call off the engagement, so she had come to handle the affairs. However, the most important thing was actually to continue looking for her child. Half an hour later, the plane came to a complete stop. Nora let Cherry sit on the suitcase. Then she walked while pushing the suitcase forward. As soon as she turned on the phone, she received a call. On the other side of the line was a frivolous but lively voice.
Auntie, you have to be careful.
Nora asked casually why.
Justin Hunt, the head of the #1 family in the States, is currently collecting your personal information from all around the world. He's probably not going to give up this time until he finds you. The voice sounded a little like its owner was gloating. Nora said, "Oh, Auntie, you were overseas previously and weren't in his territory, so you were able to avoid it perfectly. But now that you have returned, you won't be able to escape anymore. As the most prestigious surgeon around, can't you just treat his grandmother's illness? I heard that Justin Hunt is very generous, and is even a man so handsome that it's hard to come by one like him. Maybe the two of you can even develop a romance that will move one to songs and tears." Justin Hunt, the head of the #1 family in the States, is currently collecting your personal information from all around the world. He's probably not going to give up this time until he finds you. The voice sounded a little like its owner was gloating. Nora said, "Oh, Auntie, you were overseas previously and weren't in his territory, so you were able to avoid it perfectly. But now that you have returned, you won't be able to escape anymore. As the most prestigious surgeon around, can't you just treat his grandmother's illness? I heard that Justin Hunt is very generous, and is even a man so handsome that it's hard to come by one like him. Maybe the two of you can even develop a romance that will move one to songs and tears."
Nora yawned lazily. The #1 family was a big family with a big business. Interpersonal relationships within it were complicated. Treating the illness of someone from there might even end up involving the struggle for power and inheritance. Why would she involve herself with the open and secret fights of such top-class rich and powerful? She was back in the States to look for her son. She mustn't cause complications. As she approached the exit, Nora suddenly spotted a familiar figure in the arrival hall in front. She replied perfunctorily, "I'm not blessed enough to enjoy such beauty." After hanging up the phone, she tossed the phone into her pocket and cast her down coldly. She didn't expect to see an old acquaintance so soon. A man stood at a prominent spot at the exit of the airport. He was wearing a suit and looked quite bright and cheerful. He looked a little more mature than how he had been 5 years ago. He turned out to be her fiancé, Anthony Gray.
With a pickup placard in his hand, he stood there impatiently and grumbled.
When is that damned ugly fatty coming out?
Behind him, his butler said, "Mr. Gray, please be patient. The old sir has specially instructed you to refrain from making things too ugly, even if you are calling off the engagement." Anthony frowned. He looked a little irritated.
Patience. Isn't it more like disgust? She was so fat previously, and she must even be fatter after she gave birth. She probably wants to save the engagement even more strongly now, right? Why am I so unlucky to become entangled with someone like that?
His words reached Nora's ears, but she didn't bat even an eyelid. In the past 5 years, she had repeatedly brought up her desire to break off the engagement. However, neither the Smiths nor the Greys had agreed. Who exactly was entangling with whom? She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to that man and intended to leave immediately with Cherry. After grumbling, Anthony turned, and his eyes lit up. The beautiful woman who was the first to walk out of the airport was gorgeous and unbelievably stunning. It was as if the entire airport had lit up a few notches brighter the moment she appeared. Seeing the woman getting closer and closer, Anthony straightened his back and kneaded his luxury suit. Then, he smiled and asked confidently,
"Hi, beautiful. Can I ask your name?"
He was the exact picture of a male peacock with its train spread open. Nora paused and looked at him coolly. "Nora Smith."
Chapter 2, Saving Nora by Josh Williams. Recorded by Resonant Reed. Cherry, whose head was originally lowered as she played a mobile game, pointed to the placard in Anthony's hand and read out the name written on it in her young, tender voice. Then, she asked excitedly, "Did I read correctly?" Cherry had grown up abroad all this while and was currently in the literacy development stage. Nora rubbed her head and said in a cool and melodious voice, "Yes, you did." Anthony was dazzled by the casual smile at the corners of her lips. When did such a beauty come to California? She was even more beautiful and charming than this blister's celebrities. Nora was indifferent to the burning fervor in his eyes. Cherry, on the other hand, blinked and asked innocently, "Mister, are you to pick?" Before she could say, "Us up," Anthony hurriedly tossed the placard behind him and interrupted her. "Of course not, little girl. I have nothing tondo with that ugly fatty." A touch of disdain appeared in Cherry's big eyes. "Mister, you're so pitiful to be blind at such a young age. Which part of her mom was fat?" Her words stunned Anthony for a moment. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Nora stepped forward, left the arc coldly. Anthony wanted to go after, but his assistant stopped him. "Mr. Gray, don't forget the old sir's instructions." Anthony looked at Nora N. the back and made a dissing remark. How wonderful would it be if that ugly freak was even half as beautiful as those sisters? I would have put up with her antics from back then, and decided not to call off the engagement. At Hotel Finest, a hotel under the Hunt Corporation. In the presidential suite, Nora looked at her cell phone after Sherry went to bed and fell asleep. There were even 7 or 8 missed calls from the Smiths. When she returned the calls, she heard her father's angry vive cursing. "Nora, what are you doing? Where are you, and why are you not picking up you calls? Weren't you making a huge fuss about breaking off the engagement? Get yours back here right now and stop wasting your younger sister and Anthony's time when they've got something good going for themselves." It was impossible for Nora's father to let go of the Greys after climbing the social ladder and establishing a connection to such a prestigious family. This was also why he had insisted not to break off the engagement. Now the Greys had finally relented and agreed to let her half-sister marry into the family instead. There was no lozenges for Nora's father. It was only then that the two families reached an agreement. Nora said lightly, "I'll come back now." She entrusted Cherry to Mrs. Lewis, the nanny that had returned to the States with her, and went out. When she was waiting for the elevator, she suddenly heard some soft footsteps. She turned to see a child dressed in gray silk pajamas, her short hair tousled as she stood in the elevator hall with sleepy eyes. Her daughter had short hair, and her exquisite, adorable facial features made hard to distinguish whether she was a boy or a girl. When they were living abroad, Cherry would give Nora a hug every time Say went out. Therefore, she didn't think much about it. She habitually squatted down and hugged and kissed the child on the forehead. Although her voice was low, it was gentle. "I'll bring you some mousse cake tonight, baby. Go back to your room now." Her daughter's usually quick-witted eyes became dazed for a moment. She was probably so sleepy that she had turned silly. Then, under her gaze, she nodded, turned around, and walked back. This floor was the top luxury presidential suite, and there were only 2 suites in total. Apart from the only one they were occupying, it was said that the Hunts had left the other for themselves, so it wasn't open to outsiders. There likely wasn't anyone staying there at the moment. Ding! The elevator arrived. Nora went in right away. Thus, she didn't see the door to the other presidential suite opening. A tall, capable, and steady figure walked out. The man's back was to the elevator. His voice was low and deep, and he had an aura around him that was hard to ignore. He ordered the child, "Go back to your room, Pete." 5-year-old Pete Hunt stared in the direction of the elevator. The soft hug and the kiss on the forehead from that lady just now had made even him, the sole grandson of the Hunts, blush uncontrollably. Pete's face tensed up tightly. He had been brought up strictly ever since he was a baby. Even the nutritional value of his meals had to be calculated. However, a strong desire suddenly emerged in the boy who had always exercised self-control. "I want moose cake." Justin Hunt glanced at him and carried him into the room with one hand. Exuding an icy aura that kept people away from him, he walked over to the computer and continued the video conference. The person opposite him gave him their report. "Mr. Hunt, we've confirmed that Auntie has indeed returned to the States. On top of that, we've just bought a photograph of her at a high price. I'll send it to you right away." Justin's lips parted slightly, and he coldly spat out 2 words, "Find her." It was brightly lit at the Smiths' villa. Outside the door, Nora listened to the digital lock's input error voice prompt, her lips curled up into a mocking smile. The password had been changed, yet she, the Smith's daughter, didn't even know. She lowered her eyes emotionlessly, raised her cell phone and tapped it casually a few times. Then she placed it on the digital lock. A few seconds later, the door opened with a click. The lively atmosphere in the living room rushed towards her, and the crowds going about made her realize that it was her younger sister, Angela Smith's, birthday party today. Seeing that no one had noticed her, Nora found a sofa in the corner and sat down, intending to nap for a while. However, a low cry came from the deck where no one was looking. A few youngsters had surrounded a girl and were assaulting her. Angela, who was wearing a blue dress, held a red wine glass and sneezed as she looked at the girl that had been pushed onto the ground. It was her cousin, Lisa Black. She had always been in goof terms with that damned ugly fatty Nora. Smack. Someone gave Lisa a tight slap. "Did you just say that the fatty's facial features actually look pretty good? There must be something wrong with your eyes. I'll treat them for you." Hiss. She took a glass of water infused with hot peppers and splashed it at Lisa's eyes. "That ugly freak looks like a pig. She can't even compare to one of Angela's toes. How were you even able to say that she looks pretty good, Lisa?" Lisa wanted to scream from the burning pain, but someone had covered her mouth, so she could only produce muffled cries as she choked with pain. Angela suddenly squatted down. She took out a photo of Nora at her fattest and played with it in her hands. "Hey, all of you are being too rough." When the other heard her, they giggled and let go of Lisa, who covered her red and swollen eyes with her hand. "Please, let me go," Angela smiled. "Let's act in a more refined manner and make a bet." Lisa's weak voice came out of her throat. "What kind of bet?" Angela pointed at the photo. "If you can prove that she loses weight, I'll eat this photo. If you can't do it, then you'll eat it." "How does that sound? Isn't it fair?" The rest immediately laughed. "But what are you to do if that fatty can't shed the pounds? For the sake of a bet, is she really going to get liposuction done just to prove that her ugliness isn't because she's fat?" "Ha ha ha. Lisa, you have absolutely no way of proving that she'll look good after she slims down so. Eat the photo! Eat the photo!" Everyone clapped and made a ruckus. Angela held the photo up in her face. "Are you going to eat it yourself, or do you want us to help you with it?"